Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is David Feldman. I'm with the Edmonton Chamber of Volunteer Organizations. Just set some information for today and kind of have a conversation and some expectations as we move forward. I'm going to ask that everybody keeps themselves on mute. This isn't a webinar format where we've blocked everyone. This is really meant to be a Q&A because we don't have all the answers to kind of give a presentation, but we're hoping to do our best in kind of guiding everybody to the best of their ability to move forward. Right now, we all have a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. So I'm just going to give everybody a few more minutes to kind of get in. If everybody's not in the session, say hello to a few familiar faces that are here, and kind of we'll start kind of a conversation about 2 minutes. So just as we're waiting, though I think pretty much everybody is here, if you do need any help or support, or you've got any questions for us, please feel free to message Fallon. She's marked down in the attendees list as support-Fallon, and I believe she just sent a welcome message to everyone to make it easier for you to kind of locate her. As you know, we'll be kind of walking through things. I was really lucky. I reached out to a friend and somebody, a collaborator here locally in Edmonton, to see if she would join us on the call to kind of give her legal perspective on it. And that's Gabrielle. We'll do an introduction just in a moment, but just to kind of let you know who I am. I think I know most people on this call, but not everybody. I'm the Director of Learning and Development here at the Edmonton Chamber of Volunteer Organizations, and I'm also the one who does most of our governance work. So most of the calls or inquiries, if you've ever called in to ask us questions about things like bylaws or AGM, will come to me. And my collaborator, Gabrielle, do you want to come on and say hello and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Gabrielle Battiste. I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing for about 25 years or so. And my recent areas of focus, although I've done it throughout my career, are nonprofit law, charitable law, and policy governance. Separate things, not the policy governance specifically. So I'm happy to be here to answer questions. I've been following everything that's going on with COVID and providing a lot of advice to various not-for-profits, whether they're incorporated under the Societies Act or the Companies Act, or they're a Canadian not-for-profit. So I'm hoping to be able to answer some questions you might have, although I'm not sure you'll like the answers, but hopefully we can work out something together. Thanks, David.
Thank you. I think that also sets the best of our understanding of how we're going to go forward in this today. It's that we're going to be honestly just making a bunch of assumptions and interpreting things to the best of our ability. So to give everybody a little bit of history and backstory, so we're kind of all on the same page for today. April 9th, with the social distancing and isolation orders coming into place, there was a bunch that had to happen all at the same time. I remember being on a lot of phone calls about AGMs that would be happening that weekend or that week or within the coming weeks, and what do we do about it when all of a sudden we can't gather in large groups, these AGMs are in place, what are our options? And so luckily, you know, a ministerial order came out allowing us to basically hit pause on all of our AGMs. Those orders are kind of different across the country. Alberta's basically said, yes, you do not have to hold your AGM at this time. Until this order is revoked, that's it. You don't have to hold your AGM. Others in other places of Canada did things like, you still have to hold your AGM, but you're allowed to now hold it online. And so there's some back and forth of what was the best path to go forward. This is the path that Alberta's taken. And I think it's really important for me to comment that right now, we're really talking about societies, the Societies Act, the Companies Act, those who are nonprofits under the Companies Section 9 of the Companies Act, that are registered here in Alberta. That's who it applies to the most. If you're registered federally, the conversation is different because you had to follow federal regulation on those pieces. business kind of continued. We did our best to kind of make things work. As everybody knows, the state of emergency was lifted in June. And so we've had some time since then because we still have social distancing protocols in place. So large gatherings are still limited, how we can get together, where all those pieces are still in play. And a lot of organizations in Alberta still haven't opened their doors. So a great example of that would be senior serving centers. Many of them aren't operational from a come and visit us, come into our programming space. They're much more of a, if they're doing anything, they're doing things on the back end, telephone services, other forms of support, that kind of piece. As of August 14th, we received an update letting us know that yes, the Ministerial Order has officially expired. And so that pause button that was hit on April 9th is no longer in play, and we need to hold our AGMs now. And that's kind of led us to the conversation that we're having today is, okay, so we need to have an AGM. What does that mean? How do we do that? Because the social distancing protocols are still in place. So yeah, I have my AGM, I have 200 members, my bylaws say I need 50 people to show up. My bylaws do not allow for online AGMs, and I need to hold my AGM. It's supposed to be before the end of June. What do I do now is really kind of the question that's been on people's mind, that, you know, the circumstances we've been facing, and how do we move forward in that? I got a call the other day saying, look, I have 1,500 members from across the province. They don't want to drive to Edmonton for our AGM. There's that desire to stay in a hotel room, all that. Can I hold it online? And these kind of calls have become really, really common for us. So here's what we know. And Gabrielle, please jump in at any point along this. Our understanding at this time is the government treats the Ministerial Order to delay your AGM as a pause button. So it wasn't a cancellation, it wasn't a deferral, it's we paused everything on this day. If your AGM was supposed to happen during that time of the order, you've basically been given the same amount of time from April 9th to the date your AGM was supposed to be held to move forward on that. So if your bylaws said that your AGM had to be held at the end of April, so April 31st, you would have 22 days, according to their examples that they gave us, in order to hold your AGM. That doesn't make sense because we have to give at least a minimum of 21 days notice. So there's a little bit of leeway. Do it your best that you can to move forward, that kind of piece. But that's kind of how things went is, yes, hit play right now, move forward. What does that mean for you? The biggest challenge we've been having though, is when it comes to social distancing. So the two questions that we get the most is, okay, when do I have to hold my AGM right now? And how do I hold my AGM right now? What are my options for me? When? As soon as possible. How? That's more difficult to answer. The answer we've gotten at this time is that if your bylaws do not state that you're allowed to have an online AGM, you're not allowed to have an online AGM. So let that. Are there some exceptions? Is there some leeway? Maybe. And that's not an answer I like to give either. It looks like this. The comment I keep getting back when I reach out to Service Alberta, and it's one I actually really appreciate, is as a board, as an organization, it's your job to do what's in the best interest of your membership. So if it's in the best interest of your membership to not have them all gather in a space, that's for you to decide. But at the same time, we've been told very clearly that you need to follow your bylaws. And so that's the tension that we've been juggling as we've kind of been exploring how to move forward in things, what to do, what does that look like, and how do we support the organizations that are in Alberta as they kind of struggle with this to move forward of holding their online meeting or holding their meetings.
I'm just going to jump in quickly, David.
Please.
Some overriding considerations for board members of any organization. You have a good faith duty to your organization to do what's in the best interests of your organization and its membership. That is your job as a board director. Yes, you have to follow the law, but if at some point in time the law doesn't make sense or actually is harmful to your membership, then there's a fairly good argument, if it ever happens that an argument needs to be made, that what you've done is actually not prejudicial and that there was an overriding concern for your membership and you had to do this. So I mean, at the end of the day, what David said about using common sense and doing what's best for your membership and the organization as a whole is really important here. And so, quite frankly, I can't imagine in a business sense that there would be a circumstance where you might have a challenge unless there's serious acrimony within your organization. And even then, if you are doing what's in the best interests of your membership as a whole, then you've got a pretty good defense.
Thank you. I think as we move forward, I think it's easier to look at groups in kind of two different perspectives. One is, I have a group that everything's functioning normal. We have a great relationship with our membership. There's nothing contentious coming up. You know, this is a standard AGM that we hold every year. We're not expecting anything. And the other is the type of organization that knows that there is right now something going on within its membership. Either they're not happy about the board or they're not happy with decisions that are going on, and the membership want a space to voice those concerns, put in their checks and balances, provide the oversight that they're supposed to provide in the organization in a, it's almost, there's a contention or conflict kind of space going on. And I think looking at the paradigm, looking at that as a paradigm, the two ends of it is really important. If I'm talking to a group right now where everybody's getting along, things are going well, we understand that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and they're just trying to follow and fulfill their bylaws by having an AGM, I'm much more comfortable suggesting things like an online AGM, knowing that there's going to be less tension into that place, less confrontation, and people are going to be okay with it. But I was on the phone a few weeks ago with a group that there was tension, where they weren't happy with the direction the board was going. They actually wanted to vote the board out. If that board chose to do an AGM in a format that wasn't accessible to all of its members, that's where you're going to start really seeing those problems and that situation come forward. And so it's about understanding your organization, the state you're currently in, and how do you make sure that you're serving the best interest of your membership with the voice and the oversight that they want to fulfill. Another good example of that, for example, would be the senior centers. We have some senior serving centers that have a younger seniors population that is very much online, very comfortable in the online space, would have no problem with a Zoom meeting, versus we have other senior serving centers that their standard demographic that they serve is over the age of 80, may or may not even have a computer at home, would not be comfortable in that online space. That's a group that probably shouldn't be looking at holding their meeting online. Now, could they do something like a telephone AGM? Maybe. And so that's kind of the space here of, yes, your bylaws do not allow you for an online meeting. Your membership is at risk if you bring them together. What do we do? How do we find that common ground? We need to find a path forward that allows your membership to be engaged in that process.
Yeah, one of the things that you cannot do as a board is direct your membership to put themselves in harm's way, to simply fulfill an administrative requirement of your bylaw. Right? So that's off the table.
So remember, today is much more of a Q&A than a session. We've only got notice a week ago, like many others on this call. And so if you do have questions, please feel free to post them, but we are prioritizing the questions that came in on registration. One of the reasons I'm referencing senior centers is that it's actually one of the questions, a lot of questions came up to us about organizations like senior centers or groups where they have individuals that are more vulnerable to COVID-19, and therefore that bigger risk of, okay, so what do we do now? Some of the others that we've gotten, what's the deadline for holding your AGM and submitting financial reports? That, as I mentioned earlier, it was that pause button, that extension. That's that time. The groups that are going to be weird in the deadline that they've reset for us are the groups who were supposed to have an AGM by the end of April and all of a sudden have less than required notice days. And so the examples we've been given in the cancellation of the order was very clear of do the best you possibly can to hold it as close to possible within that window you have. So if you've got more than 30 days, and really anybody who is expecting, whose bylaws indicate that they should be holding an AGM by the end of August, really needs to be moving on their AGM now to hold it as soon as reasonably possible in a way that works for them and their membership as soon as they can. Those are the groups that are going to be struggling the most right now to get things up and running. So anybody who had to before the end of April, maybe, and end of March, and anybody who really right now wasn't expecting this order to end, they're the ones that have to be moving to get things going. what's that going to look like, how you're going to make that possible, it really comes down to your specific organization, who your members are, where they're located, and how do we make sure it's safe for them to get together. Everybody else who has a little bit more time in that window can start exploring, finding ways to give notice, and setting expectations with their membership and kind of corresponding with them to see what their options are available. You have time to get buy-in from your membership as well. And so that's an option for you.
David, what do you think? I mean, if you're struggling to find time, or if you find that you're under time and you're having to rush things, then perhaps it's best to limit this year's AGM to the bare basics, right? Don't make the changes to, apart from potentially putting in, everybody should be putting in electronic means of holding an AGM into their bylaws. So please, for heaven's sakes, bring that one change to your bylaws. Aside from that, it may be best just to hold the bare basics AGM, and then if you need to, call a special meeting later in the year to fix anything else that needed fixing.
Actually, that's a fantastic suggestion, and probably the best thing you can possibly do right now. I would put a caveat to be careful about any bylaw changes, especially if you're holding it in a format that isn't allowed in your bylaws. So if you kind of said, look, our bylaws don't allow us to hold it over the telephone or hold it online, but we're going to do that anyway for the safety of our members, that's not a really great time to be putting in that suggested change. But otherwise, yeah, from the Societies Act perspective, it's the presentation of your financials, your audited financials is the biggest thing. You have to hold an AGM and present your audited financials. After that, it's pretty much what's in your bylaws. So take a look at your bylaws, really understand the minimum that needs to be delivered in there, and go forward from that perspective. Okay. So I'm going to go through the questions, but they're kind of, we've answered some of them we might have more clarification. So if you've asked a question, I'm going to explore, and you want to provide more detail, please let us know. Clarification as to doing a virtual AGM, as I said, we don't have any great information. I've been interpreting in person in bylaws to mean I am present in the moment to contribute and vote. But in person isn't actually defined in the Societies Act. And that's really important for me to note, which means it's up for interpretation. Gabrielle, you might actually be better off answering that of how can that be interpreted? Where are my dangers of interpreting it that way?
So when it comes to interpretation, generally the courts will look to what has been past practice. And if your past practice for in-person has always been physically in person, then likely they will go with that. With the caveat that, again, if this is the one thing that will prevent you from causing harm to your membership, and you can't get around that by having it outdoors or something like that, then it will likely be okay to have a different interpretation on this one event until such time as you can change your bylaws. So yes, consistent past practice will likely indicate what the interpretation of that's going to be. And if it's always been physically present in person, that's likely going to be the interpretation. But David's right. There's an argument to be made that in person is having everybody present and able to vote and able to undertake what's in your bylaws accordingly. So counting the votes individually, whether it's using your raise hand on Zoom or whether it's people being able to understand the process, as David indicated, if your population is elderly or simply not familiar with the tools that are available for online, that's going to be a problem. Or if they're rural and don't have access to broadband, also going to be a problem. But if your population is such that, if your membership is such that you are putting them in direct harm by holding an in-person meeting, then that's going to factor in as well, and you can't do that. So it depends. I'm sorry.
No, perfect. I want to step back. I noticed somebody kind of made a comment about the conversation of the bare minimum comment you made. And it was, I'm probably pretty sure there's some boards right now that are thinking of just skipping their AGM this year. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, you can't skip your AGM, unfortunately. That is one requirement that's in the law. You have to hold it some way, shape, or form. So using your best efforts does not mean skipping. It would be like using your best efforts to attend a school class. I mean, you can You can attend it outside the window, you can attend it online, but you can't skip it or you go to detention. So that's the same scenario here. If you try to skip your AGM, you're going to end up in detention with the government somehow if somebody makes an issue about it, and they will down the road.
So somebody commented that they believe the fine is $100 if a member is upset about missing the AGM. But if my understanding is correct, it's not just the fine, it could actually undo all the work and the votes and the decisions made by the organization since they're no longer valid as well.
That's correct. Yeah.
So the fine is one piece, but it's actually, yes, technically your board isn't legal at this point is kind of a general way of interpreting that.
Yeah, it's,
okay.
and again, it's always a risk analysis. So reverting from the strictly legal perspective to the business perspective, anything you do as a board is a risk analysis. You can, as a board, choose to ignore legal advice and break the law. That's entirely your purview. I mean, and or accept the fine and or accept the consequences. But you need to know the risks. So make sure you understand them before you take any action.
Thank you. So when it comes to groups, one of the questions I have here is what happens to my AGM is over 100 people. It must be done in person and outdoors is not an option. How do we hold our AGM? I can't answer specific questions like that without seeing your bylaws, really finding out how clear and strict those pieces are. And so that's really the piece that we have to put on everything from today is make sure you pull out your bylaws. Actually, better yet, make sure you go to a registry's office and get your most recent stamped and official set of bylaws. Our experience is most groups, the bylaws that they're actually working from aren't actually the ones that have been approved by Service Alberta and aren't their legal documents. We used to do a bylaws refresher session where we'd ask you to bring your bylaws, and we'd also make sure we had a legal copy of all the bylaws from all the groups that were coming. And 60% of the time they weren't the same document in people's hands. So make sure you're working off the documents that have actually been approved, that are stamped, that have been accepted by Service Alberta. See what it says, find out where you have opportunities in there, explore in that way. That's the biggest challenge. If outside's not an option, there are bigger spaces, possibly telephone, possibly online. That all comes down to your group. And also some sets of bylaws, if your membership is smaller. So if, let's say, for example, your membership is 100 people, but it's only 100 people, you have a strong relationship with those 100 people, and you know that you can get, signatures to approve things, so almost do in writing style AGM. A lot of those are actually allowed in older bylaws and in some parts of the Act. So take a look at that as well. If you're talking about 2,000 members and everybody has to accept a document and everybody has to sign off saying, yeah, I'm good with it, that's a little bit harder. What if an organization has more eligible voters than gathering requirements allow? What if the vulnerable persons are part of that membership? Can they safely gather? And what if gathering is not desired by the membership and thus quorum is unachievable? That's a tough one. Do you want to take a start on it?
So there are a number of reasons that gathering is not wanted by membership. Sometimes they're trying to effect a coup in terms of the directors or the organizational operational direction. Sometimes there are simply ethical or moral differences about wearing masks, for instance. Sometimes they just don't like each other. So at the end of the day, it's really incumbent on directors to do the best they can to make sure that their membership is informed as possible. And if people don't show up, then there are rules in order to adjourn the meeting and come back again. And you just have to follow the rules. That's all that you can do in those circumstances. If not enough people show up for quorum, then go adjourn it, hold it again. If they still don't show up, then talk to your lawyer.
Any advice if you don't have a lawyer?
You could try get one. Go to there are a number. If you go to some legal assistance organizations, and I'm sure David and ECVO have that information handy. Then there are a number of lawyers doing pro bono work that are available. Also a number of lawyers like me who offer extremely low rates during COVID in order to help organizations, charitable organizations, deal with issues that they're having because everybody right now is suffering in this economic time. So see somebody who has some expertise in this area.
I think we've got Integral on the call too. So I'm going to let Mike put a comment in if he's open to people coming his way or not, and what that would look like into the chat. Sorry to put you on the spot. But yeah, like you said, there's a whole bunch of options. There's pro bono law and other supports out there if you really need that clarification and advice. We're happy to take a few calls, but like many of the nonprofits, our capacity is stretched right now too. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you're asking us for support, I'll be there as fast as I can, but there might be a little bit of a delay.
David, I'm just going to interrupt quickly to answer a question here. I've got my chat line open here so I can see things. So for organizations whose bylaws allow you to hold an AGM without quorum, that's the best possible scenario. You check for quorum at the start of the meeting, and then you wait. And then if people don't show up, then you have quorum from whomever is present at that meeting. So you should have bylaws that allow you flexibility in that regard. And again, this is a bit of a wake-up call for all nonprofits with older sets of bylaws, that your bylaws really do need to be changed in order to allow you to have some flexibility for situations that come up, and put a little bit of future planning into this, because this pandemic won't be the first pandemic, and we've got climate change happening. So yes, if your bylaws allow for you to hold an AGM without quorum because you're allowed to do that, then go right ahead, because whomever's there becomes quorum, I assume.
This whole change in thinking around bylaws has been really interesting and challenging for me, because I often come to bylaws from a, how do I make sure that your bylaws are written to give the oversight to the membership that they need, and that balance of a healthy organization? What are in-person meetings? I'm not a big fan of online AGMs when your organization is local. You know, if you're the Southwest Edmonton Hockey Club, you don't need an online AGM. Everybody lives in a central location, and it makes sense to be able to come together. Your board should be close to that. You should come together because your meetings and your conversations are better. And yet the perspective shift, the worldview shift that's had to happen for me of like, how do we create bylaws that, yes, encourage that, but also allow the flexibility we need in circumstances like this that we never expected to happen to us. And so a lot of bylaws were never, you know, and I'll, you know, a lot of bylaws that I helped create would have never allowed for an online AGM if you were an Edmonton local organization, because your members would be stronger making that decision together. Your oversight would be stronger making that decision together. We never expected something like this to come our way. And so now we're stepping back and saying, all right, when we make that changes, what does it look like? How do we allow it? What are our next steps to go forward in that?
David, there's a question that's come up, and you and I talked about this just before this session. Your bylaws, if they don't have a specific way to hold your AGM, if they're silent, the act is also silent, so you're good to hold it however you want. It doesn't matter how you've held it in the past. If your bylaws don't say you have to have it in person, then great. Double check the rest of your bylaws to see that that's okay, because there might be some sneaky stuff in there about voting has to be in person or whatever the case might be. So you want to read further down and make sure that you're okay with all of the wording in your bylaw and not just that one section.
That's a great point. Don't just read that one piece. When you look at your bylaws, look at everything, right? Your bylaws will reference each other throughout, so you can't just look at the AGM section. I've got a question. Do you think the Ministerial Order will be renewed as gatherings of members are risky? I don't at this time believe it'll be renewed unless things really change. So unless we go into another state of emergency, I don't believe it'll be renewed at this time. Otherwise, they would have done that. If we have an in-person AGM scheduled for September 23rd or something around that date, are we okay? My impression based on what we've got is yes, it's close enough. It may be a little bit off, but that's probably in the best interest of your members. If you've already scheduled it, you know the date, it's been out there, it's giving enough notice, so you should be fine. And if an AGM has already been deferred, is there a time limit for holding the AGM? So your board deciding to defer the AGM is not the membership deferring the AGM. That's just your board operating within the conditions that were given to it with the original ministerial order. So yes, you need to now follow the fact that that ministerial order has been removed and start planning your AGM in accordance to that.
One specific question, David. Mm-hmm. And this is a good example, just to go back to the question that you've already covered about if your AGM was supposed to be held during a time period when the pause button was pressed. So for instance, if your AGM had to have been held by June 30th, then when now do you have until to hold? And our example says that you calculate the number of days between April 9th and June 30th when you had to hold it. And then that amount of time is how much longer you have from August 15th. So to the individual who was asking about that, I'm not sure if October 20 falls outside that. I didn't have enough fingers and toes to count, but double check and then act accordingly.
The notice of the end of the order, the expiring of the order, really kind of, it wasn't concrete, it wasn't solid, right? It really said working to do what your organization needs, talk to your legal counsel, work to accomplish these things. It doesn't really say you have 30 days. It gives us an example as a guideline and less of a hard and fast rule, is how I've interpreted it. And so, you know, if we're talking plus or minus 10 days, that's not a big deal. If we're talking plus or minus 4 months, that's a different conversation.
By way of example, on another question that just came up, and I'm going to read it out loud from Jensen Kennedy, our bylaws are also not specific as to an in-person AGM, but our voting bylaws say voters must vote in person. Could the in-person be voters participating in the virtual AGM? And so to my point before, if it's always been done in person, then the general rule would be continue in person. But in this particular circumstance, it would really depend on what your membership is made up of, or whom your membership is made up of. If it's a population that is susceptible to COVID or should not be all brought together, then I would go ahead and hold it as a virtual vote, and then be careful how you do it. So for example, my father actually just ran a virtual AGM for his Seniors Learning Association. And he went, they had, I think, out of 650 members, they had 70 people actually show up on the virtual, and they did a training session, and they went through, and every time there was a vote, they went to each and every person individually, unmuted them, and asked them for their answer. It takes a lot longer, but you're guaranteed to find out and make sure that that person is actually participating, which is the key ingredient there.
Thank you. That's a good point. One of the problems with online AGMs is quorum doesn't actually mean that they're present anymore. I can just log in, turn it on, and walk away. And yet in a vote, I need to make sure that they're present for those pieces, especially if it's not normally allowed in my bylaws. So I think I've gone through and answered, we've gone through and answered most of the questions that we got ahead of time. So now it's really to kind of make sure that we're not missing anything. So I don't know if I've missed any of the questions in there. Fallon, if you can jump in for a second and let me know what we've missed and kind of go from.
Hello, absolutely. I do have 8 questions that I don't believe we've addressed, although they may be duplicate. We might have gotten to some information later if you want me to read them out. Gabrielle, did you have a comment?
No, go ahead. I was actually just going to address one of the questions, but you.
Great. I think our first question was from Josie Richardson. How to answer the question, how come other organizations have held online AGMs?
Yeah, so without looking at everybody's bylaws, the ability to hold an online AGM is unique to you, right? So it's not a legal framework that's in place, it's your rules that you put in place earlier. So I've worked with a few organizations that have looked at their bylaws, found ways to interpret them where they believe that in person or their voting privileges and the way it was written allowed them to have an online meeting. Other groups, I've looked at their bylaws and it said very clearly, you know, must be in a such and such location, must meet in a place like this, right? Must be physically present. And so they haven't been allowed to hold online AGM. AGMs. And so it comes down to your organization and your bylaws.
And I would add to that, and David, I've just gone back after you and I discussed, again, previously to this, I've gone back and reviewed that ministerial order for that time period of the pause button having been pushed. There's a bit of a vague reference to the ministerial order not preventing the holding of online meetings. And some people have interpreted that to mean whether or not you had a provision about online meetings, you can go ahead and hold it. And other people have interpreted that to mean you must have had a provision in any event, and then you can go ahead and hold it. Again, it really comes down to, as a board, you need to know what your risk exposure is, and then you need to document why you're either accepting or not accepting that risk and moving ahead in whatever direction you choose. Just make sure that you're well informed and you can make a well informed decision in the best interests of your membership and your organization.
It's a really good point, because we had a lot of confusion early on, and I remember emailing one of the people at Service Alberta that we work with and saying, so are we allowed to hold online meetings? And their answer to me was very, was if your bylaws say so, and in the best interest of your membership. And so it's like, which one is it? And so we've kind of been existing in this gray space where hopefully your bylaws say so. And if they don't allow you, then delay your AGM unless you need it. And we've had a few cases where we've talked to people where it's like, we are about to lose half our board, and therefore our board won't have quorum. Our bylaws don't allow us to have online meetings. What do we do now? And so we've kind of gone down that path of what's in the best interest of your membership is to have a board running the organization with that piece. How do we make that a reality? And have gone through and made decisions based off of that.
Yeah. And I guess one final comment on that overall is, unfortunately, ECVO can't tell you as a board what to do. If it was really clear, they could. The one benefit, I say this kind of tongue in cheek, the one benefit to actually having a lawyer and asking them this question is that they're insured for the answer, right? So, and if they give you bad advice, then you have options. But at the end of the day, that decision is likely going to come down to the board, and hopefully you also use some external expertise as well. Whether or not it's pro bono, it still has the same force and effect.
Thanks, Gabrielle and David. Our next question is from Darby Walton. We sent a notice out in July for our online AGM set to take place on September 10th. What would the procedure be here if notice and invitations have indicated online?
So I would step back and say, are you allowed to have an online meeting to begin with? And the fact that the question's in here, I'm going to assume that it wasn't specifically stated in your bylaws that you can have an online meeting, and instead you're trying to move forward to make that possible. You know, without looking at the specifics, if your membership seems to be engaging right now, seems to be registering for it, you're getting good turnout, you can have good representation, good governance, you're probably okay to move forward. But really take a good look at your bylaws and see where there's clarity or if there's direct contradiction. And also take a look to make sure that your membership representation and good governance is taking place. So if a very small percentage of your membership is actually engaging, make sure you find out why. And if it's because they're just not interested, that's different than I don't know how. Gabrielle?
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said.
Perfect.
Don't have anything to add.
Okay, we have a question from Prakash. It was, would it be acceptable if we post our annual report and financial report on our website to inform members?
Sorry, Fallon, can you repeat that?
Absolutely. This one's from Prakash, and the question is, would it be acceptable if we post our annual report and annual financial report on our website to inform members?
Instead of holding an AGM? My guess to that answer, I'm very comfortable saying no, because the requirement is for you to hold an annual general meeting in one form or another, and the presentation of the financials need to be present at that annual general meeting. So they don't have to be voted on unless it's stated in your bylaws, but they have to be presented at the AGM, and it's at the AGM. So whatever that means. Now, Is it good practice to maybe make those available anyway? Yes, but it's the need right now to hold that meeting to allow for engagement with the membership.
David,
Yeah, and I'm just gonna, oh, sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, David Prakash here. It wasn't instead of, it was that AGM has been postponed. So if we inform them, they may be not in the dark that we are somehow holding back anything. It's not instead of, it's more to inform them, because our AGM was required by bylaw to be held by March 30th.
Okay.
So we had contacted corporate registry and they said, because of the pandemic, we could defer it. So it's to inform, not instead of. That's the question.
And I would say that was great practice. So normally your members would be waiting for something at that time. You couldn't have your meetings, so you provided them the information so they can have their oversight, and that's fantastic. And so now it's the next steps of that is holding your AGMs. During a time you couldn't, now you can, and now you still have to hold it. But I think it's awesome that you shared that information with them when you had it available.
Okay,
Yeah, and then just to jump in with that, it's in order to be able to allow your membership to have access to your financials, you need to know, going back to David's statement, who your membership is and what they're comprised of in terms of their ability to access that. So again, if they're seniors without technical knowledge, or no matter what age they are, without technical knowledge, if they live in rural areas where they don't have broadband, then you may end up having to mail them out. But whatever the practice is, best practice in governance is making sure that that information is available to your membership. And I highly agree with David. You should always post that online and have it available online.
Okay. Our next question is from Deb, and the question is, does the AGM have to be held in that calendar year? What if you forwarded it to the next year and held 2 AGMs that year? Is that permissible?
Do you want to answer it? I think we're both ready to.
I already answered it actually in the chat window. I just said it's not an option to hold 2 AGMs in 1 year. It's quality, not quantity. And the quality aspect dictates that people need to be safe and need to be able to fully participate. And so that's why.
Thank you. I must have missed that one. We have a question from Crystal. It was with regards to the attendance. I would argue 100 people in a room with a high percentage of seniors is a harmful situation. Others in the society would disagree. How do we reconcile that difference?
The part that's stumping me there is others in the society disagree. And so that's interesting and complicated and sounds specific to the organization. I think there's a lot of questions there. Is there tension and those kind of pieces to address? You know, the data, if the room was big enough and it met all the social distancing guidelines and all of that stuff from the advice that we've been given, technically that's considered the safe path for us to move forward. I sit on that same side of 100 seniors in a room together right now in the middle of a pandemic isn't a good idea. But your question is, how do I reconcile that? What are my options? What are we moving forward? I would be uncomfortable being on a board that was putting that many people at risk. And so there's conversations that I need to make, and I'd be talking about our liability and the risk that we're trying to take when we're trying to make a decision. You know, it's what would a reasonable person do? So if we think about the general public, what would they be deciding right now? And is that liability and risk we're willing to take on? Gabrielle?
Yeah, and I'm just going to jump in and say again, it's a board decision. So notwithstanding what the rest of your members might think, it's the board's job to make that decision on behalf of the membership, because you are the accountable group and you are bearing the liability. And as long as you make that decision in a well-documented way that's in the best interest of the organization, you do not attract liability. So just knowing that should provide some comfort. And Fallon, I'm just going to skip down to something that Lauren's put forward, or her iPad anyway, and said, what about a hybrid AGM? That is a fantastic idea, and actually something that we're looking at doing at Autism Edmonton, where I sit on the board. And we've done that at directors meetings as well, because we have individuals on the board who are not comfortable attending virtually for our directors' meetings. And so we've said, you know what, we've got room for a certain number of people in the office and can accommodate social distancing, and others who are comfortable not being in the office and are okay online, then we will have that hybrid AGM, and that is perfectly fine, as long as, again, your bylaws are okay with that. Although I think that's even a better option, because maybe you can get a majority or quorum, depending on what your bylaws say, in person actually, and then have the rest online. That's a great idea, Lauren.
I love that suggestion.
Okay, I've got 4 questions left on my list anyways. We have one from Fionn, and the question is, our bylaws requires to hold AGM by June 30th. The board postponed the AGM to October 20th. Will this be okay?
Based on the math formulas that they've given us, yes. Right, so it'd be June 30th, the dates between June 30th and April 9th. That amount of days added to August 15th, I believe you should be okay.
Okay, the next one is from Leslie. The question is, or the comment question is, I thought we needed to give a certain amount of time for notice about an annual general meeting, for example, 60 days. From what you have said so far, we are already overdue for the annual general meeting.
So the Societies Act references 21 days as the minimum amount of notice. That doesn't mean it's your organization's amount of notice. That's the minimum for all organizations. Your bylaws can have even more time allowed in there. So if your bylaws allot 60 days notice, then you have to follow your bylaws. Book it 60 days from now, 61 days, so you have some time to plan, but that's kind of your best bet, is to meet all the rules where they're at.
And before we move on, I'm just going to apologize to Kennedy Jensen, because I think I said her name backwards. I can't tell whether or not names are flipped on the chat screen, and I just saw her picture now. So Kennedy Jensen, I'm sorry.
Okay, we have a question from Donna. The question is, our voting needs to be done by show of hands. Maybe could we do raise hands online to qualify?
Yeah, in my opinion, yes, as long as everyone's comfortable with that. And if you don't, you're going to have somebody scrolling through. And if you've got a bunch of people like we do now, it's going to take a while, and you're going to have to make sure that everybody's clear that those raised hands stay up. And if somebody doesn't have one, you're going to have to clarify whether they meant to put it up or not.
Yeah, I would recommend, recording it just so you have that record. There's nothing wrong with recording your AGM. Matter of fact, it's a great way to make sure the minutes are easy to take and all of that afterwards too. And then you have that to support you going forward.
It also keeps people respectful.
Mm-hmm.
Question, comment from Jennifer. We've been referencing examples that have been seen or given by Service Alberta. Are these examples accessible somewhere, or were they shared in discussions with either ECVO or Gabrielle?
So some of them were examples given to us directly in a document with the announcement of the expiry. That document's no longer available online. We can't find it right now. If we can find it, we'll share it. Others have been specific nuanced cases. And so if you're sitting in a place right now where you're trying to use one of those examples to guide you forward and you have questions, give us a shout. And I think we should, if we have some time, give some space. There's a bunch of capacity building organizations on this call, actually, and I'd love it if they could jump on for 30 seconds at the end and kind of introduce themselves and let you know how to connect with them, because they're spread out across the province and they're there to help you. But when it comes to kind of a specific case, it's better off to give somebody a call if you're sitting on the fence of what you should do, because we'll have more examples to kind of work from and a better understanding of what's going on in your bylaws and in your specific situation, rather than saying, well, this worked for so-and-so. Their bylaws could be completely different from yours. Matter of fact, one of the comments earlier of, this group was allowed online and this one wasn't. Not all nonprofits are registered under the Societies Act. Right? Some are registered under the Companies Act, others are registered nationally. There's many specialty acts across the province for things like egg societies and others. Just because one group can do something doesn't mean the act and the legislation that you're under allows you to do that as well. So just please keep that in mind.
Okay, we have a comment, which I thought I might just share with you in case you had any insights, either David or Gabrielle. It was from Ian. The comment was, I have no idea how our bylaws were approved without any date required for an annual general meeting. I guess we just need to hold it before December 31st.
I would, sorry, go for it.
Oh, I generally actually draft bylaws so that the date can be set by resolution and have it set, but also there are often dates stated in them. So it's okay for the board to, by resolution, set the date for an AGM.
My addition to that is make sure that the bylaws you're working off of are actually the ones that have been approved. So there's always a good chance that they might have been approved by your membership at an AGM, but actually weren't stamped and accepted by Service Alberta. So if my experience has been, if you say the date will be set every year and it'll be set by resolution of either the membership or the board, that's okay, and you'll pass. But if you just say, if you don't actually have some kind of guidance on a date, they'll often get sent back to you for correction. And so there usually is something there to guide you. Maybe it's we missed approving the date last time, but you have to have some reference to an AGM date.
Okay, question from Terry. Can we hold a meeting in person and at the same time make it available on Zoom with notice to the membership?
As long as the notice is accurate.
Yeah. And it's the best, yeah. Follow everything else we've kind of talked about today of making sure that it reaches your membership and you're doing your best to meet your bylaws, and you should be okay. I noticed a comment related to the one we were just talking about. 2, the bylaws say that it has to be set at the direction of the board. If those are your official bylaws, they've been stamped and you're good, then yeah, your board can set the date. You need to have an AGM, sorry. The AGM still needs to be held annually though, right? So just because the date can be set at the direction of the board doesn't mean that you can skip a year. You're still required to hold an AGM every year. And then there's another one of, doesn't the Act say 6 months after the fiscal year end? Nope, the Act just says that you have to hold an AGM. How you choose it, it's usually your bylaws. A lot of bylaws say 6 months after our fiscal year end.
Although it depends which act you're looking at.
Sorry, I was referencing the Societies Act. Good catch, thank you. Okay. So we've got 8 minutes left on our allotted time. I think we've gone through all the questions. If I've missed any, please let us know. I do have some time. So I know Mike is here. I don't want you to put you on the spot and throw you in front of the camera, but if you're comfortable to hop on and talk a little bit about Integral Org, and if any of the other capacity builders that I might have missed are here, can you let me know? I'd love to give you some time to let others know about you, because right now everybody's got tons of questions, and that's what we're all here for. And Mike, if you don't want to, just send me a message saying no thanks, but hopefully they'll come on.
Hi there, I'm Julia from Integral Org. I am just popping on, and I was not prepared for this.
Sorry.
Mike, our fearless leader, just left on. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Mike, our fearless leader, has just, he's on vacation this afternoon, so he had to leave the call. I was unprepared, but here I am. So Integral Org, we are located in Calgary, but we serve organizations all across the province. As Mike mentioned in the chat, we do one-on-one clinics. That's probably the best option to engage with us. It gives us the time to actually find out what's in your bylaws, what the specifics of your situation are, and what's going on. And then we can proceed from there. So that's what I would recommend for engaging with us. We can book a time, we can actually sit down, find out the information from you, and then rather than saying it depends, we can maybe give you a little bit more guidance.
Thank you. And for those wondering, Integral Org produced a great write-up to kind of explore this a little bit further. I believe we shared the link, and if not, we'll make sure it goes out right away. Do we have anybody else? Fallon, do you know if anybody else is here?
Liz from EFCL.
I know I'm putting you all on the spot, so I apologize, but you're all here, and I thought it would be a good time for people to connect with you. No, okay, that's okay. I don't. So any other questions?
I think we did have a few more questions in the chat, David. So PCCE office to get a stamped copy of our bylaws? Do we just go to any registry office, which I've responded yes.
Yeah.
We have Beth, who's also asked, what if board elections are due this year? How may that be dealt with? May they be postponed with the current sitting extended?
So once again, it's one of those depends, but in most cases, the bylaws are very, very clear that the membership is who elects the board. There's a few exceptions. A lot of boards have the ability to elect board members in between AGMs that have to be ratified at the next AGM. So you might have the ability to kind of handle some of that or not renew all your membership. But for the most part, yeah, if your bylaws are saying AGMs are your elections are this year is written into your bylaws, and that's how we have to move forward. You need to find a way to hold them.
There's one other question about the Interpretation Act, which is a great question actually, and thanks for asking it. The Interpretation Act does provide assumed timelines. So if you're sending something through the mail, for instance, it says that if you're authorized to do this under some kind of legislation and it has to be effected by mail, then it's presumed to have been received 7 days later. Now, you can have in your bylaws a different time. So, but if you are sending that notice out by mail, you do have to be cognizant that yes, you can't expect that notice to be effective until a reasonable time has passed for it to have been delivered. So yes, you do need to add that to the number of days that you're using to give notice. That's a really important point.
Now, if your bylaws say you need to provide 21 days notice, and here are the 3 means of doing that, and one of which is newspaper and another is email and the third is mail, for example, you know, yes, we assume that the mail doesn't arrive for 7 days, but you've already provided notice through the other methods that are more instantaneous as well, correct?
As long as you're, again, it would go to how many of your membership are receiving or capable of receiving the other versions that you're using as to whether or not it's appropriate. I would think that in most cases it would be appropriate, especially the newspaper one, since, although I'm not sure who uses that anymore. I didn't even know they had a newspaper still. I thought it was all online. It's like having a phone in your house for some reason. But yeah, just be cognizant of who your membership is, and if you're sending it all out by mail, then you have a problem, quite frankly, and I would add that additional number of days. If you're sending the majority out by mail, again, I think you have a problem, and I would add that additional number of days. But if it's a minority of people, I would rest on the fence as well. Yeah, because good governance dictates that you really take into account the needs of minorities in your organization and accessibility.
Fallon just noticed that Calvin's here. So if anybody does have any filing questions, he would be great to be able to answer those as well. And we're able to stay a little bit longer if there are some specific questions on things, just let us know. But other than that, I don't see any more questions. Fallon? No? Awesome. Thank you, everybody. What I'll try to do is get out some information about all the other capacity builders you can reach out to. If specifically those that are more connected to specific organizations or regional, I know not everybody here on this call is from the Edmonton region, and so there are a lot throughout the province that are there to help you. And they're amazing resources. So community leagues, you've got the Federation of Community League, Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues, fantastic. Liz is on the call. I don't know if she wants to hop on and say hi. We put Julia on the spot from Integral Org. I'm not sure if Fuse Social from Fort McMurray is here, or CCVO, or some of the other volunteer centers. But I'll do my best to kind of get information out to everybody in case you do have questions. And as always, feel free to send a message to our office. I'm governance@ecvo.ca. Just remember that it'll take a little bit of time for us to get back to you, especially if everybody who registered for this session is emailing us all of a sudden. Other than that, have a great afternoon.
One last question, David. Can we squeeze in one last one?
Sure.
Our chat box is quite active right now. Josie, was the recommendation to change bylaw ASAP to read electronic means?
You know, so I sit on a different side of this one. and I'll let Gabrielle answer in a second, but this, if you weren't following your bylaws right now to have the AGM you're about to have, you know, if you've got to stretch things and they say in person, and so you've decided that online is okay, this isn't the year that I'd be pushing for bylaw changes that allow that kind of stretch. So could you do it? Yes. But I would just be mindful of that. If there's ever going to be an issue or a challenge, then you're kind of opening yourself up for that space. Having said that, I also think it's something that we need to think about. I've been doing a lot of work to figure out how do we allow online bylaws, online AGMs in this circumstance, but also make sure that the oversight and the connectedness still happen. And we're exploring ways to make sure we support everybody in that conversation. Gabrielle?
Yeah, and you know, if you are a little queasy about whether or not you're breaking the law or your bylaws by holding this, and whether it's not necessarily in the best interest of your membership because you could have done it another way, it was just a bit harder to do it another way, then is not the best time to do it. But you could hold a special meeting as well in order to be able to pass bylaw changes.
Any more, Phil? All good? All right. So thank you, everybody. Like, you know, most of you should know how to reach us if you've got any questions. And we'll be in touch. This had a lot of interest in it. So if these kind of Q&As are helpful, we'll try to see if we can hold them more often to support organizations out there. Have a good afternoon.